Hey everyone, ready to jump into the Roman Republic? You guys sent in some amazing sources for this deep dive. It's wild to think this civilization, so huge, so impactful, started with a story, a myth.
It really does feel like we're about to crack open a history mystery novel. Myths, legends, hard facts, all tangled up together.
Right. You got to start with Romulus and Remus, raised by a wolf, founding a city, talk about a movie pitch. But gotta ask, fratricide, not exactly a smooth start, right? What does that say about those early Romans? One source even called them, well, goons.
Easy to see it that way, isn't it? But this story, this myth, it stuck around. They chose to tell it, which means something. The Romans, they weren't afraid of a little violence. They built their identity on it. And the Sabine women, that's a whole other layer. It's like they're trying to say, yeah, we had a rough start, but look how we created order. Look how we made a civilization.
So more complicated than just violent beginnings. More like, yeah, we had growing pains. Look at us now.
And speaking of growing, the sources mention all these different groups on the Italian peninsula back then. Who were the big players and how they shape Rome's path.
Picture Italy back then. A real mix of cultures. You've got the Latins, obviously. They're the ones who got the Roman ball rolling. Then you've got the Greeks down south, bringing their culture, their ideas, their trade. Huge influence. But the Etruscans, now they're the ones you gotta watch. They weren't just good with metal, they were architectural geniuses.
Wait, the Etruscans were more than just the metal guys. I need details.
Oh, way more. They brought Rome the arch. Sounds simple, but it changed everything. Suddenly, Romans could build bigger, bolder aqueducts, amphitheaters. And don't forget the Etruscan alphabet. That's how Roman ideas spread, how they governed, how they became Rome. Think about it. Shared language, innovative architecture, that's a recipe for an empire right there. So we've got this blend of cultures, a prime location, talented neighbors. You're right, it's all adding up to something big. But how do we go from villages to a full-blown republic?
Well, it wasn't exactly a peaceful transition. Think about it. They went from monarchy to republic because they were done with tyrants. And our sources don't hold back. Tarquin the Proud, Rome's last king. Let's just say he didn't leave on his own terms.
Yeah, sounds like Tarquin's reign was a little rough around the edges. Murder, oppression, the whole shebang. No wonder the Romans wanted something different. But for those of us who haven't cracked open a history book lately, what does republic even mean here? Don't think we're talking modern-day democracy, are we?
You got it. Today, we think one person, one vote. That's democracy. Roman Republic. Not so simple. They had some democratic ideals, sure, but it was more about representation on a much larger and, let's be honest, much more brutal scale.
Okay, so instead of voting on every single thing, they elected people to make the tough calls. Makes sense. Rome was huge and only getting bigger. But who exactly were these decision makers? Our sources mention three main branches of government, right?
They do, and it gets pretty interesting. First, you get your consuls, two of them. Elected for, get this, 1-year terms.
1 year? That's barely enough time to get settled in.
Exactly. And if that wasn't enough, each consul could veto the other. Talk about keeping things interesting. Then we've got the Senate, mostly made up of patricians, the wealthy landowners. Now, they couldn't make laws outright, but they controlled the money and advised the consuls. So yeah, their influence was huge. Lastly, you have the plebeian assemblies.
Now, that's where the everyday Roman gets a voice, right?
They got it. But it wasn't easy. The plebeians, they had to fight for every right. They even went on strike at one point just to be heard. Finally, they won the power to elect tribunes. These guys, they could veto any law they thought was unfair to the plebeians. So you've got this constant back and forth, the elites versus the common people.
Can't imagine the political drama. So let's recap. The consuls stuck with each other for a year and able to shut down each other's ideas. The Senate holding the purse strings. And the plebeians fighting for their slice of the pie. Sounds like a recipe for gridlock, or maybe just pure chaos. Was the system really balanced, or were the patricians calling all the shots? Yeah, this whole idea of Roman citizenship, it's always presented as revolutionary, but was it really as inclusive as some sources say? Or is there more to the story?
You're hitting on something really important, Roman citizenship. It was a big deal, sure, but it was also complicated, and definitely not what we call equal opportunity. Our sources are clear. Not everyone in the Roman Republic got the same privileges. Not even close.
So who actually got to wear those metaphorical togas of citizenship? Who made the cut?
Think of it like an exclusive club, hard to get into. You had to be male, over 15, and here's the kicker, a landowner.
Right, because land equals power.
Exactly. And women, technically citizens, but try voting or holding office. Nope. They were mostly stuck in the domestic sphere.
So much for Roman women debating politics in the Forum.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of slaves and freedmen. Slaves, no rights. They were property, not people. And freedmen, sure, they weren't slaves anymore, but full citizens, not a chance. They hit roadblocks everywhere.
Makes you think about how far we've come with civil rights, even though, yeah, there's still work to do. But back to those lucky enough to be citizens. Our sources mention togas were about more than just fashion.
Oh, yeah, way more. Togas were power moves. Way to show off your status. Can you imagine? Your clothes literally dictating your place in the world.
Talk about a power suit. But it wasn't all togas and political speeches. The sources make it clear this was a military society through and through. Tell me about those legendary Roman legions.
You're right. The Roman army, those legions, they were the muscle behind Rome's expansion. We're not just talking about groups of soldiers here. These guys were organized, disciplined, downright terrifying to their enemies. At their peak, we're talking 50 legions, each with thousands of soldiers.
Wow. That's insane. And get this, serving in the army. Not optional, it's like being called for jury duty, but way more intense.
It's true, serving in the legions. That was your duty as a citizen. You showed your loyalty, helped Rome grow. And this whole idea, this belief that Rome was strong, it's what fueled their conquest. It's what led them straight to their biggest rival yet, Carthage.
Which brings us to the big leagues, the Punic Wars. This wasn't just a border dispute. This was a showdown for the Western Mediterranean. Expert, set the scene. What was at stake here?
Imagine a world where Rome, this rising power, is going head-to-head with Carthage.
Carthage.
They have the navy, the trade routes, the whole package. It was a clash of cultures, a fight for dominance that raged for decades. This is the stuff history's made of.
And then there's Hannibal, this brilliant Carthaginian general. He marched his army with elephants over the Alps. I mean, that's not just strategy, that's legendary.
Oh, absolutely. Hannibal crossing the Alps. That took guts, planning, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, he lost in the end, but his strategic genius, that's something they still study today.
It's mind-blowing to think about those battles, the sheer will on both sides. But in the end, Rome comes out on top, right?
They did. But victory came at a price. Those Punic Wars. They made Rome the top dog, but they also exposed cracks in the system, cracks that would eventually spell the end for the Roman Republic.
So much to think about, right? We started with Romulus and Remus, a myth, a story, and we ended with Rome, this superpower on top of the world. It really makes you realize history isn't just dates and names. It's about ambition, struggles, the good, the bad, the complicated stuff. It makes you wonder, what stories will we leave behind? What will they say about us?